This meeting of the Board of Tyler ISD is called to order. We do have a quorum. The meeting has been duly called, and the notice of the meeting has been posted in the time and manner required. Thank you all for coming out today. Do we have any public participation? No. Okay. Okay, we'll move along to continuous improvement in student outcomes portion of the meeting. We have a bilingual and English as a second language annual evaluation.
All right, per statutory and federal requirements, we have your annual bilingual ESL annual evaluation. Here we go.
Morning.
Testing.
Angle it
Okay.
up. There it is.
Great. Good morning, President Washman, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Crawford. Today, we are bringing to you our bilingual ESL annual evaluation. We are required to share this with you each year. Just a reminder as we're going through that this is based off of the 2021-2022 school year. So although we do have some data up to date, it's based off of last year's data. And then our new director of bilingual ESL, Ms. Elizabeth Moore, will take us through.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here.
Hello.
Okay, so let's embark on this journey. Okay, so let's start with some terms for review, just so that we, as I'm going through some data, we can look at these terms. So emergent bilinguals is the most recent term that's we're using for our current English learners. So emergent bilinguals is something that kind of started maybe 2 years ago, and last year transitioned into being used more often, and now we're working on sharing it with everybody as well. Previously used terminology includes English learners, English language learners, or limited English proficient. These terms are being interchangeably used, and they're still used. For example, for PEIMS reasons, limited English proficient is still being used, part of the coding for that. English as a second language, I just wanted to review this term just so that we are reminded that for Tyler ISD, for our programs pre-K through 12, we are using the English as a second language program. And for example, there are two types. In elementary, we have the content-based program, and grades 6 through 12, we have the push-in model. And we'll go through those in a little bit as well. I wanted to also review the early exit bilingual program model. So basically, for early exit bilingual program, the primary language of instruction decreases as English is acquired. So that is one of the models that we have here with Tyler ISD. And then dual language immersion program, this one is the difference between this one and the early exit as well, is that literacy and academic content is used throughout the program in the primary language and in English as well. Here with the district, we have the models one way, so in two ways. So the main differences between those two are that identify English learners are mainly the ones in the one-way program, and then in the two-way, it's interchangeable with identify English learners or emergent bilinguals and English proficient students too. Okay. Now, looking at our district, we wanted to give you guys a breakdown of the schools and what programs they're utilizing. So, for example, Austin, Douglas, Griffin, or Pete and Ramey, we have the early exit bilingual program there. Dual language, one way, it's Bell, Bonner, and Dixie. Dual language, two way, it's Birdwell. And all of the pre-K through 12 grade other elementary schools have the ESL or English as a second language model, content-based, and then grades 6 through 12, the push-in. A difference between the content-based and the push-in, content-based, we're basically serving our teachers need to be, all the core content teachers need to be ESL certified. The push-in basically is students have an elective that serves them with ESL practices through the teaching of and acquiring of the language. So an example of those classes would be like reading one as well, so for second language learners. So there's like specific classes that the students attend during middle school and high school to support them acquiring the language. Okay, now going into our numbers, last year we served 4,475 emerging bilinguals, and just wanted to share with you all that we serve them through their home language was 7 different languages, Spanish being the main one. They came Mandarin, Korean, Vietnamese, Arabic, and Turkish. Just a fun fact, non-emergent bilinguals, we serve about 22 languages for them. So it's increased from this year. I don't have the exact numbers, but according to the home language surveys for this year, we might be at about 24 languages for emergent bilinguals. But we don't have a snapshot yet, so it could change. Okay, so moving into the recruitment, because recruitment and having the correct certifications for our teachers or the aligned certifications is very important. So one of the things that we wanted to highlight here was the bilingual ESL visiting international teachers. I found this to be very exciting when I joined Tyler ISD. My previous experience, I haven't been with a district that supports the visiting international teachers with their visas, so this was really interesting to see. So 12 teachers last year, employed 163 total. They received a $3,000 stipend, and also we wanted to highlight that for the top program, about 14 out of the 28, 29 teachers that were nominated are bilingual teachers. So moving on to the certification. So last year, and compared to the year before, we had 5 bilingual exception waivers or 5 bilingual exception requests that we had to submit to TEA. So basically what that was is 5 classes we were not able to offer the bilingual program, so we had to offer an alternative program. In this case, I believe it was the ESL program, basically because we didn't have 5 groups where teachers were certified. And last year, 5 out of those 4 teachers received their certification, so we were compliant at the end. That one other teacher is no longer with us. The ESL waivers, so ESL waivers is the teachers that are not ESL certified, but we don't change the program, it's just talking about their certification. And last year we had 33, and 5 of them were certified, and currently out of those 33, 14 of those teachers, we're working on getting their certification. With the bilingual exceptions and ESL waivers, we have to provide some assurances to TEA, and one of the assurances is to provide or have a comprehensive professional development plan so that we can get these teachers certified, and in the process of that year of them getting certified, to also provide them support so that our students are being taught at the quality level. So here is excuse me, a plan that we followed last year, and we had trainings for the shelter instruction observation protocol, for example. We offer 2 days of that throughout the year. For example, this year we have 4 sessions of days 1 and 2 to offer to the teachers, and we're also extending it to teachers that are not necessarily needing the certification. So that's why we have it coded in here as all teachers, because it's something that the district expects our teachers to go through so that we can support all students as well. Okay, so this is just an overview. And moving on to reclassification or the exit criteria for students to exit the bilingual ESL program, I just wanted to walk you guys through first the requirements for that. And per Chapter 89, students to be reclassified or exited first need to demonstrate the adequate level of proficiency in the TELPAS exam, and also receive approaches, meets, or masters on the STAR test if they're taking it in grades 3 to 8 or in English 1, English 2 at the high school. For example, grades 1st and 2nd and 11 and 12, they no longer have those exams, so to be reclassified, they have to take the Iowa, which is a standardized test that reviews reading and writing for them. And lastly, there's a recommended reclassification rubric for teachers for that. But usually when the students have met those requirements of meeting the domain requirements for TELPAS and pass their EOCs or Iowa, there's data enough to show that they can be reclassified. Now, how many students reclassified last year? We had a total of 75 students reclassified. 38 of those students were in the bilingual classroom, 30 under the ESL program, and 7 of them were under a parent denial of services. When students enroll in our district, they are given the home language survey, and if they qualify for bilingual or ESL services, but the parents deny the service, then that's where this category falls in. A denial of service does not mean that they no longer have to follow through the reclassification process, so we just also follow them. So last year we had 67 students that were reclassified, and the year before that we had 127. But last year, I'm gonna take you back to this chart. Last year, or 2019, 2020, was the year that we didn't have STAR, so the reclassification requirement was only TELPAS scores. So our scores for reclassification were higher, so we were at 127. Last year, they brought back these requirements, so then students also had to meet the STAR requirement to be reclassified, not just TELPAS. And out of that, so the 2020, 2021 shows a 54% growth. We were at 38 last year, but the state, we met the state expectation of 36%. So we were there. And part of the reason why we took that hit of 38, it's because we were in the speaking portions here. Let me walk you through this. So in the year 2020, 2021, we wanted to compare where were the students in speaking and basically why did we go down. And 2020, 2021, the students that score at the beginning level, that was their growth. So the first chart on the top left, my top left, you can see how they grew in the listening, speaking, reading, and writing, which are the domains that we need to look at. Students that were at the intermediate level 2 years ago, where did they land this last year? So we see that the speaking, for example, for the intermediate was the lowest. If we move on to the advanced students, the same thing, speaking was the lowest. And then for advanced high, again, speaking was the lowest. So those advanced high students, if they did not reclassify, it's because of the speaking piece as well. So that kind of did hinder them. So looking into speaking, looking at a few things, and also at reclassification, there's some students that do receive accommodations. If a student receives accommodations in the content language supports, then they don't qualify to be reclassified even if they met all the other requirements. So they need to meet the STAR requirements without any accommodations per se. So that could have been one thing. Also the online speaking, all of these exams, listening, speaking, and reading were taken online. This year they're adding writing online as well, so we're hoping that we do great as well there. But TEA is aware that there's a national problem with speaking and reclassification, and one thing I learned is that they are looking at the reclassification requirements. Hopefully this year we'll have an answer as to how we're going to reclassify for next year. It's the hope. And here, just a comparison, because reading is also what's part of the reclassification. We can see that our emerging bilinguals compared to our non-emerging bilinguals are growing at the same rate academically. So that was a good thing to do. One thing that third grade and English 1, I should have taken that out, but third grade and English 1, the reason they're not represented there with the percentage is because we didn't have a comparison from the year before. So it's not that they didn't have any growth. Okay. And last but not least, we just wanted to share that over the summer, we offered a bilingual ESL summer school, and it was very well attended. It was pre-K through third grade, and it was offered at Griffin and Orr. And also, part of Title III requirements, we have to engage our parents, our families, and these were three of the big things that we do. We have a parent newsletter that goes at the beginning of the year. End of the year, we had our Success Community Fair, which was well attended as well, and nonprofit organizations came and also supported our families as well. And then the Telpass Family Night, where it was shared with the parents what the exam looks like and the requirements and what they can do to support. And that's our team. I don't know if you guys have any questions.
Okay, thank you for the report. Does anybody on the board have any questions or comments or anything like that?
You asked the board, so I'll have some administrative comments.
Dr. Crawford, do you have any administrative comments?
Or, yeah, it's just some things to point out. One, just briefly on Birdwell, we've got to make a decision pretty quickly on, what their high school programming looks like. As we've got kiddos now that are in that magnet that are K-8. And if we're truly wanting them to graduate with a certification from either one of our high schools, or I guess early college, we've got to make sure we're serving them, because there's a specialized certification. Y'all remember when we were making that a magnet, that's what we're really going for here. Another noticeable thing here is the 24 languages spoken. The 7 that are identified, we think, in 24 this year, and a little bit how the world's changing around and it's kind of starting to come to Tyler a little bit. We used to could count on our newcomer rate at being on like 5%. Most of our students were born in Tyler to Hispanic families, but now you're starting to see some other languages represented on there that shows that we've got some folks that are moving here, probably from a variety. It could be the border, it could be just the way humans are starting to move around a little bit as well. The other thing, so summer school, Ms. Moore, and you may not know this answer, so I might have to rely upon some other folks that are in the room. So that's great, 300 plus kids in bilingual summer school. What does the span of that look like? Like, how long is it? What does the day look like in regard to that? So I have a point on this.
This year it was at, but it's an all day. They go from like 8 to 1. They get breakfast and lunch. It is all of our Tyler ISD, so bilingual teachers.
Monday through Friday or Thursday?
Monday through Thursday.
Thursday, that's typical. What's the span for the all summer? My point on this is, I know what our data looks like at Boulder and what we spent for Mentoring Alliance for that. So I've got some concern just to share with the board and administration here. We spent a lot of money for Mentoring Alliance summer school at Boulder and did not have 300 students attending that. So my plea here is for the community, and we need to do more pleading with the community and those parents to get their kids to what we're trying to do in the summertime. Obviously, something's working magically with the bilingual program to have 300 kids. I don't know what the attendance rate was, even though we had 300, but we had that all summer, same thing we do with Mentoring Alliance, and the amount of students that are prodded to go to summer school is encouraging in that program. We've got to figure out a way to get the same thing happening with Mentoring Alliance, because we scholarship the kids of the Boulder side. Am I right on that? Yeah, do they pay for anything for the bilingual summer school? No.
And they offer transportation.
Bilingual does? Yeah, so I'm just making that comment up here for letting y'all know what some of the challenge is on us keeping the Boulder side open for too many years longer, because it's just not getting the ROI like we are here. And we've got to figure out a way to get the community inspired to be able to send their kids there. On the Telpass, so when we were doing some of the comparisons, similar to other standardized testing that we've got kids that exit out of there, and we've got new kids that we're testing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I just want to make sure the board, and this is a pretty seasoned board here, it's still an apples to oranges comparison in a lot of ways. So whenever you see, well, those kids didn't meet the high level of speaking per that, that's another crop of kids that came in that may have gaps a lot wider than what the previous year had as well. So anyways, just want to make that comment before everybody starts looking at the data, because I'm an old tax guy, AYP guy, just like Ron Jones is. He's a lot older than I am when I say I'm old. But he lived that world a lot longer than I did. That old AYP penalty of comparing last year's juniors to this year's juniors is still a struggle that we have not yet overcome in a lot of our standardized testing. They've done better with the STAR, obviously, because of the growth measures, and we've shown growth here as well. But it is still a comparison of apples to oranges, different kids, different years. So just want to make that comment.
I have a question. When you talk about reclassification, can you explain exactly what you mean by reclassification? I know
Yes,
that might
ma'am.
be a really stupid question, but
The only stupid question is the one you don't ask, Ms. Harrison.
So taking you back here, so basically the word reclassification tends to be for them to exit the program and be coded non-emergent bilingual. So reclassification is the first term that's being used. And then once we do the meeting through LPAC or the Language Acquisition Committee, then we can go ahead and code them exit. So first is reclassification to see if they meet these three requirements. Once the committee agrees, like, yes, we're good, the teacher submits the rubric, then it's coded as exit. Once they exit, they do get monitored. So we have some students that be monitored year 1, year 2. We still have meetings for them. Year 3 and 4, we no longer have meetings, but we still know that they're there. As coming into the district, one of the things that I do want to work on is our monitoring. And we're working on increasing our data conversations and see how we can support the students that once they exit, or if they need us, or they need to be brought back because of grades or things like that.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah, so that 4475, I mean, that's like 23% of our kids. I mean, that's a big number there, so.
Yes.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments? Thank you.
Okay.
We
Thank you.
appreciate- And glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited. Maybe that's why everybody's coming here too, Tyler. So
Yeah,
thank you.
okay. House Bill 3906, update on STAR redesign.
So, Dr. Curitan will now be joining Dr. Norman for the STAR redesign, the enthralling presentation about what the new STAR test looks like.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. So board, as you know, this is the year we've been preparing for the STAR redesign. Dr. Curitan, he wanted y'all to take a practice test, and I said no. I said we won't do that. But the purpose of this presentation is to take you through some of those updates. What Dr. Curitan is going to show you is what students have been expected to do in the past on STAR and EOC, and what this year's test will look like. We have a side-by-side for you. Also, in addition to that, we're going to talk to you about how we've been preparing our students and our staff for this year. Dr. Curitan?
Thank you, Board. And just to continue Dr. Norman's point, you don't have any idea how much fun you're missing out on by not taking one of those practice tests. It's glorious. Okay, so we'll jump right in. We're going to talk about the STAR redesign that was the result of 3906. Really, HB 3906 wanted a STAR assessment that was a little bit more supportive of what students should be doing in the classrooms instructionally, so how they should be assessed in a classroom. And we'll go through that. We'll go through what that should look like in an effective classroom and how that's going to look on the new. There are really 4 pieces to this. There's the online testing and accommodations, new question types, there's cross-curricular passages, and evidence-based writings. And we'll go through all 4 of those. I will say, just briefly, we transitioned to STAR essentially the year we returned from COVID. And so we're not going to really jump on that too much. We've been there, we've been doing it. We've really not had any issues for 2 years with that. So we can always revisit if you have questions, but we're not going to touch too much on it today. So when we talk about the new question types, the focus there really is to do what should be happening in effective classrooms, which is students responding to questions with a variety of formats. So not always just a multiple choice question in a classroom. And in prior years, that's what we saw in STAR. It was always multiple choice, some gridables, and then some constructed responses in prior years. Really, with this redesign, the goal is to provide a large number of alternative question types that students can respond to in a way they would similar to a classroom. With regards to these new question types, before we go through them, 75% of the assessment, no more than 75% of these assessments, these new STAR assessments, can remain multiple choice. Based on everything we've seen, we think that will be a smaller number, so we think it'll be more of the new question types than it will be multiple choice. So we think it'll be a smaller percentage than 75. But we are going to go through these so you can kind of see what students are going to respond to as we move forward. Like Doctor is a little bit different nowadays. You'll see what the student has to do on the right, just a sample question. But they have to fill in all of those boxes to write a certain number in expanded notation. So they actually have to go to that calculator you see below the boxes, type the numbers in each one to get the answer correct. Here's another multiple choice. So on this multiple choice, you've got essentially several models on the left-hand side as your responses, and the student has to pick the correct model. On the right-hand side, this is an example of the fraction model. So what will happen is students essentially will have to, and it's not a great picture, I apologize, but they essentially will have to shade in the number of boxes or the number of rectangles to represent some fraction. So in this case, I believe it was 3/4. They have to shade in 3 out of those 4 rectangles to answer the question correctly. So they're shading in the model. Again, we have a multiple choice on the left-hand side, just kind of a standard multiple choice question from an RLA passage. On the right-hand side is an inline choice, which will be present in math, RLA, and social studies. And on an inline choice, when they click that little drop-down box that you see on the right-hand side there, it'll give them four responses, and they have to choose the response. So this is kind of like an inline multiple choice type. Hotspots. Hotspots are somewhat interactive, so you actually click on an image or click somewhere on the text, which we'll talk about in a minute. On the left-hand side, you can see an example from science. This is a multiple choice question. Again, it was on a prior STAR test where they actually have to select the circuit that's closed. And on the right-hand side, it's a similar question, but they actually have to select the light bulbs that would light up based on that model. So they actually click on the image to answer that question. On the left-hand side is multiple choice. Again, graphing. So they're going to be given, they were given 4 graphs with lines, and they had to solve for that equation. On the right-hand side, they'll get a similar question, but they actually have to plot the line themselves. Or they may have to plot 2 points on that line to get the answer. So graphing, it's a little bit more complex, but they've actually got to fill in those lines. We've got multi-select, which is essentially just like an old school kind of multiple choice question, but there's multiple answers. So they would select 2 answers in this case in response to that particular question. And this question type is probably the one we'll see most commonly. It can be on all the assessments. Hot text, which is very similar to our hot spots. So hot text we'll see in elementary reading and secondary social studies. The difference between hot text and hot spot is that a hot text question literally provides the text, in this case a paragraph. There's some sentences that are interactive, and they essentially have to select the sentences that answer that question. I'll point out too, you notice on this hot text question, it says select 2 correct answers. So it's not just picking one, they've got to select 2 in this case to get that correct. We're getting through them, so hang in there. I should have warned you there were quite a few. We've got the number lines, which we had a similar type question before with multiple choice. The number lines were provided, and they had to pick a point to answer that question. With these new number line questions, the number lines are interactive. They actually have to plot the points. So they have to plot the location of those points. We have drag and drop. Again, on the left-hand side is just multiple choice, but it's similar to the type of question they'll see now. This is a math question, but you can see it in science and social studies. Here, they're going to drag those boxes down into the equation, but they could also drag words into a sentence. They could drag words into an image. There's a lot of variation with drag and drops. Here, they would drag it down into the equation to get the proper equation. Okay, so match table grid's a little bit more complicated. Again, there's not really a one-to-one with the multiple choice, but we did put one that kind of looks and similar to what you have to do with these question types. With match table grid, what happens is it will give students a list of rows with, could be statements, it could be numbers, values, and then they have several columns that are like options. And then they have to check, for each row, they have to check which column applies. So in this case, when they look at the original price of the shirt at $16, did discount 1, 2, or 3 apply? And then when they do it for $28, the same thing. The last one we'll touch on right now is constructed response, and we'll talk about these a lot more in just a minute. Constructed responses really, we saw them a lot on the writing test in 4th and 7th grade, which was eliminated a few years ago. It's coming back in the form of short and extended constructed responses. And I'll just point out here, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but if you look at the prompt on the left, it tells the student to write about the best teacher you know, tell who it is, and explain the characteristics that make that person a great teacher. Look at the new prompt on the right, and it says write a well-organized informational essay that uses specific evidence from the articles to support your answer. So with extended constructed response, all of our RLA students will see those. The short constructed responses will be on RLA as well as science and social studies. Okay, so those are our new question types. That's the first significant change that we can plan for. The next piece of this is our cross-curricular passages, which have to do with the students' background knowledge. We want to make sure that students all have the same level of background knowledge to answer questions appropriately. It's what should be happening in an effective classrooms with effective teachers. And the way that this is going to show up on STAR is that their passages, at least their informational text, will draw off of standards that should have been taught in other contents. So most notably science and social studies for 3rd and 4th grade, as well as 6th and 7th grade. So here's an example. This is a 5th grade, potential 5th grade RLA test passage and question. So that passage on the left is about the cholla cactus. And it talks about, I believe, adaptations and how they live. It's directly connected to what students are taught in 4th and 5th grade science. So they should have the background knowledge to understand that passage based on what they were taught the prior year as well as in current 5th grade science. On the right-hand side is an example of a question that could come from that. And so you'll see that's literally just part of the passage there with those hot text responses where the student has to select 2 of those responses to get that question correct. The key with these cross-curricular passages is even though this is a science text or it could be a social studies text, they're not assessing science or social studies standards on the RLA test. It is going to be just an assessment of the RLA standards. The last piece we'll touch on is the evidence-based writing. So again, if we go back to what effective teachers do, they ask students to write about or ask them to write based off the text when they do write samples. And so that's what we're going to start seeing with all of our constructed responses on our RLA assessments moving forward. If you recall, 4th and 7th grade writing, that standalone writing assessment was eliminated a few years ago due to 3906, HB 3906. So moving forward, there will be writing on all tests in the form of short and extended constructed responses with the exception of math. So they'll see this in reading, science, and social studies. And just to elaborate a little bit before I show you an example, essentially what's going to happen is they'll be given a reading section and then they'll be given a short prompt. So on the short constructed responses, it could be a question that's 1 to 2, 3 sentences long, On the extended constructed responses, which is what we'll see on RLA, they could be much longer. So kind of like our old, I keep going back to 4th and 7th grade writing, or English 1 and English 2 writing prompts. That's essentially what they'll see on 3rd grade through English 2. They will be graded on a 5-point rubric, and it'll be either informational, argumentative, or correspondence. So correspondence will only be at the secondary level. The other two will be at the elementary. And I should add, informational and argumentative could be elementary or secondary, but correspondence will only be at the secondary level. So again, just to go back to this example that we provided you, left-hand side, that's from 4th grade writing a few years ago. So write about the best teacher you know, tell who it is, and explain the characteristics that make this person a good teacher. If you flip that and look at the new prompt or potential new prompt on the right-hand side, this is again from a 4th grade test. Write a well-organized informational essay that uses specific evidence from the articles to support your answer, and it kind of gives you an outline to follow. So 2 different styles of prompts that we'll see. Just to give you some idea of how we're trying to prepare for the redesign, because it is a lot to digest, we did train our returning teachers on June 1st and June 2nd, so we had them take the practice assessment. We actually had them build some of these test question types that were in Edgents, which is our data management software, testing software, so that they could get a feel for what that was going to look like. We had them look at the scoring so they understood how these questions were scored as well, because they could be 1 or 2 points. We did add science and social studies unit assessments to 3rd and 4th and 6th and 7th grade. There's no STAR test for science or social studies in those contents, but that content can be assessed through background knowledge now. Or the content won't be assessed, but that could be used as background knowledge on the RLA assessments. So we want to make sure that we're staying on track with that content. Also, we designed all unit assessments and all of our benchmarks to follow the STAR blueprints for this year, at least based off what we know so far. So we've redesigned those and kind of honed how those look with the new question types relative to prior years. So. And with that, if you have any questions, we can answer those for you.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun.
What's the point of changing it to this? What was the point of this redesign? To just trick them?
They do it every few years.
Just to go back, yeah, really the idea with, if you go back to 3906, HB 3906, when they put that in statute, really the idea was to be more instructionally supportive, to align more with what they expect to see in an effective classroom. So I think that was where the argument really started with, what does that look like? What does instruction and assessment look like in an effective classroom? And so then they're taking that and trying to kind of apply that to what the STAR redesign will be.
I mean, I'm not worried about the kids dragging and dropping and filling in all that. They do that all day long on their Chromebooks. It's just, these seem very tricky. I'm really concerned about my children. Specifically one.
I like the writing because it gives them a more realistic thing to look at and to write about instead of having a prompt about your favorite teacher or that. So it's incorporating the other subjects that they learn. So I really like the writing aspect of this test. And oftentimes the community says that teachers teach to the test, but you have to teach elements of the test so that they'll know what to expect. So we are not teaching to the test. We are just teaching so that they'll know what the expectation is for the test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem like reading comprehension is going to be a major component, especially when you kind of take away some of the, multiple choice where you can maybe deduce a few things. And I just feel bad for the kids that don't pay attention real well on the cholla cactus, especially. A lot of cholla cactus questions there. I'm kidding.
So the unit assessments that they're taking right now, that my daughter just took, those are similar to the questions that are, okay. And how many times do they take the unit assessment test throughout the year? Is it?
Well, it really depends on the content, because RLA typically has longer versus math. But that is one thing that we've been telling teachers is you can't just depend on them being exposed to these new question types when they take a unit assessment. And so we're giving them resources and banks of questions so they can use them as bell ringers or their exit tickets as formative assessment. So they're being exposed to them more often, not just waiting on that unit assessment. Just let us know if y'all want to take that practice test. We'll get it to you. So.
Principals took it yesterday. They enjoyed it.
How'd they do?
I don't know if they were graded on it, but it's just really pretty much was,
Really should have graded.
let's all take it and then let's grade ourselves too, then, after what I saw in there. Oh my gosh. I mean, forever, you've heard legislators, you've heard parents, the professional educators talking about teaching to the test. I think this is all being pulled that direction again because you saw this on here. Now, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's not going to it's not going to be high level. It's high tech. I mean, it's going to be challenging. And so I'm not saying they're teaching to the test just to pass it, but you're going to have to play with it a whole lot in order to get the outcome that you want. There is no A through F pause this year. So we're rolling into this with what you just saw versus what we used to do. We're going to compete. We're not going to make any excuses, but I am stating a fact that there is no A through F pause as we roll into this. Ms. Atkins, Mr. Bergfeld, you've been on the board long enough. You're a teacher. Y'all remember when we would change assessments, et cetera, you'd have a pause year. You'd have some what-if ratings that weren't released publicly. You know, so I'm just stating some stuff. Personally, I think the new test looks like it was designed by a retired software engineer. Just gonna let that sink in a little bit. I've got two other statements, but let's just, everybody else gets it. Catch me in here when we talk about that in just a minute. Don't know what I'll cover that under. Student safety. So, mental health. There you go. For the superintendent. Two, the good news is, thank you, board. And thank you, Uncle Esser, for the one-to-one devices. Along with the backing of us as we switched from 5 to 6 student management or curriculum management systems to Canvas. You know, when you have Google Earth as one of your things or whatever that, what was it called?
Google Classroom.
Google Classroom, whatever. And then you have AirPods over here or Nearpod or whatever. We've got a warehouse, and if our teachers are using it with fidelity and our kids are using these things with fidelity, it will lessen the sting of this, much like you're talking about with the curriculum and the assessments, the interim assessments that we're giving here as well. So appreciate y'all for that. Renaissance, you know, we've had a pretty good interim assessment, growth assessment structure in place. One thing I will say, whatever product we're using, better get on board with this, or we'll be looking for another one. So give me your feedback on how well the REN stuff actually kind of aligns with this. Remember, we had NWA, and then we went to Renaissance because they kind of had a bundle of stuff as opposed to this testing. So the chief school officers are back there too laughing. Be brutally honest. It's a public meeting. We'll put our vendor on alert. What you got?
Yeah, so right now, we know with what we're seeing on these practice tests, the new question types, I'm not sure that it's necessarily aligned with what we're seeing as coming our way on STAR right now. We know there are other vendors that do that.
That's RenStar, right?
Renaissance STAR, correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so Renaissance, based off what we've seen, is not aligned to that STAR item types, the new item types that we showed you. There are other vendors that are aligned that way, and so we'll check and see, because the more, really, this is about exposure for those kids, and the more ways they can see a drag and drop, the more ways they can see, the better prepared they are, is really our gut feeling.
So y'all have seen some other materials? Amplify have anything? No? Not yet? Yeah.
The passages that are amplified are similar.
Okay. The reason I'm letting y'all know about that is because whenever you're at the grocery store, or you're at PTA meetings, or you're at, a game or something, and we wind up switching what we're using, either Renaissance gets on board, or it could be anything, Curitan XL, whatever we're gonna call it, should get on board and get aligned if they want to keep our business. If they're not aligned, we're not just gonna keep doing it just to keep doing it if it's not beneficial for us. So when we make the decision to bring y'all something and y'all support us on that, and you get trapped at the grocery store or at church on a Sunday about, I can't believe they're making us learn. We don't do that just to disrupt what we're doing. The disruption came from Austin, and we're trying to do the best we can to give our kids a chance to win, to give our teachers a chance to win as either. So again, putting them on notice in regard to that.
Going back to whenever we made our goals after Lone Star governance as a board, and we started going into this assessment thing yearly, we wanted as a board an assessment that aligned with what we were going to be judged on. And we've switched that a couple of times since we rolled into that deal. So it's important that our kids are tested throughout the year on something that'll, the whole district's gonna be judged on at the end of the year. So we want them to, see drag and drops and not imagine drag and drops.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, the commissioners has said frequently about bundling a lot of this stuff together. And I'm a contrarian about all that. My fellow superintendents are not. They don't want Austin to tell us how to teach it and what to teach it and when to teach it and how to assess it. We want local control. I want to win. I want stuff that's bundled and aligned so that we can get to the end game. We learned that in Dallas, didn't we, Rojo? We kind of flipped the switch on that. And and that's what we do here now. So we're not going to be this type that fights it. We can go down that path any further. The last thing I'm going to say is congratulations to Dr. Curitan for his appointment to the newly redesigned statewide, what's it called now?
TAG, Texas Accountability Advisory Group.
Yeah, so they used to have what was called the ATAC, which stood for what?
It was essentially the Accountability Technical Advisory
Committee.
Committee.
APAC was?
Accountability Policy Advisory Committee.
Okay, now it's blended.
Now it's TAG.
Now it's TAG.
You're it.
You're it.
So instead of me calling it TAG, I call it a TACAPAC, because it was ATAC and APAC. So he is now on the attack. Now, how many people are on there?
Total, there's probably 20, but I think from other districts, it was around 15.
Okay.
Across the state, so.
Yeah, so
Small group.
So having a seat at the table says some things about Tyler, but it also has some things to say about Dr. Curitan and his, his prestige, or whatever, lack of a better term, amongst TEA, amongst accountability folks, TSA, which is Texas School Alliance. It represents, 40% of the kids in the state. So glad for that. Selfishly want to make sure that we champion him, but at the same time, we're glad to have a seat at the table so that we can have some boots on the ground expertise to go alongside this. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding that presentation? Okay, thank you. We've got a class size update.
Class size update. It's that time of year. It's October, and Tasha Bjork is going to sit on the hot seat and talk to us about class sizes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As a reminder of what this is, we used to have to present waivers to the TEA twice a year for any class sizes, grades kinder through fourth, that are more than 22-1. We put in our district of innovation so that we didn't have to do that waiver anymore. We provide a half of a classroom aid for each class that's over. And so this is a listing of all the classes by school that are over. For instance, the first one, Birdwell, they have 3 kinder classes, and they have, they're all over, but they're over by a total of 5 students. And as you go down, you'll see that for each school. The first block is bilingual, and the second monolingual. As a reference point for this same time last year, we had 29 classes that were over for a total of 51 students. And this year we have 35 with the very same number of students over. So there's less students per class that are over. Two of the schools that are over, Birdwell and Caldwell's 10 students. That's intentional to build their magnet program, and you can tell in Caldwell it's mainly in 3rd and 4th. So they're trying to build that up, and so they take a few extra students to do that. I don't think there's really anything else of note. Do you have any questions?
Sorry, the whole board's not here to ask you questions on this report this year, but I think we're good. I think we're good on it.
Okay.
As Tasha walks away, go ahead. We're good. We might want in the future, or just a little after report, provide this board, since we've got some new board members on here, how far we've come over the years in regard to this. I can't remember what it was my first year here, but I remember sitting in that back conference room and talking about it and like really worried about it, because it was like I've only been here for 2 months. Mm-hmm. Right. We backed down. And so we appreciate y'all letting us DOI this instead of having to wait on Austin to do it. It needs to be presented and controlled at the local level than opposed to, the Travis building down there. And so anyways, any questions about that, feel free to contact us about it, or Tasha as well.
Okay, we do have some action items, 3 of them. Let's see here. First one we have is consider approval of campus targeted improvement plans for Rise Academy and Boulder Middle School.
So we had to present these last year when they were rated as a 2Ds. I think they were 2Ds last year, right? Yeah, and so this is the second year. You've got to do 2 years of it if you come off. In other words, this year Rise is an A. Y'all remember that? And then Boulder actually rose, how many points, y'all? 12 or 13, 14 points, something like that, to a C. So in saying that, if they perform adequately, a C or higher this year, we will not be back with y'all to present a targeted improvement plan. So any questions about that, we'd love to hear from you if you need either now or later on about what we may be doing to ensure that we're going to maintain acceptable status at both of those campuses.
Great. Do I have a motion to approve item A?
I move we approve the targeted improvement plan.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it, the motion carries. Next, we are approving the continuing education and training Clearinghouse professional development plan for 22 and 23.
Some of the rulemaking that gets, it lags a little bit after a legislative session or new things that are coming out of TEA, but now this is to be presented to y'all about what our professional development plan looks like every year. So it's in your packet. We're already well inside the 22-23 year. We'll try to get that to you a little bit earlier next time around, but y'all know we've got a lot of good PD going on. And again, this is for inspection. I think there's some other things behind it as well, so that y'all know what our teachers are being professionally developed with, and making sure that it's the meat and potatoes of education and not some of the other jargon stuff that y'all are hearing out and about. So presenting that to y'all today for action. If you got any questions about that, contact me or contact Dr. Gropel or Dr. Norman.
Okay, do I have a motion on item B?
I move we approve the Continuing Education and Training Clearinghouse Professional Development Plan.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed. Ayes have it, the motion carries. Next is item C, which to consider the approval of the Head Start Program Information Report for 2021 and 22.
In your packet on page 13, you've got a report, an annual report from the 21-22 school year as required by Head Start for you to be reported to.
Great.
Any questions about that after y'all consider and take action? Obviously, you can talk to Dr. Gropel, Dr. Norman, or Brandy Holland, Director of Head Start, who's here today.
Very good. Do I have a motion on item C?
Oh, I got this one too. I move we approve the Head Start Program Information Report.
All right.
Second.
All right.
Got to prove I'm here today.
Very good.
I made it in the
Favor
box
say
score.
aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it, and the motion carries.
One catch for 10 yards. There you go. All right, there you go.
So next, we have some discussion on the Head Start Annual Leadership and Governance Training.
So we have Ms. Holland here today as Director of Head Start. I've already introduced her. She waved at you. We've got a video that we're going to show y'all. It's 8 minutes long. That way you can say you are trained.
Hi, and welcome Head Start members to your annual Head Start Leadership and Governance Training. During this training, the learning objectives are to understand the roles of governance and to recognize how Head Start management systems support leadership and governance. When we see leadership or management during this training, we are referring to the Head Start leadership team and policy council, which are made up of parents and community members. And when we see governance, we are referring to the school board. Both leadership and governance set the program's direction, exercise fiscal and legal oversight, and ensure there is input from parents, staff, and the community in the development of the Head Start program. The three leadership entities of Head Start support us in our 5-year Head Start grant journey. The governing body, which is the school board, provides legal and fiscal oversight. The Policy Council, comprised of parents and community members, provide input toward program direction. And the management staff, or Head Start leadership team, handles the day-to-day operations, activities, and analyzes data to implement the informed decisions that are made by the Policy Council and the governing body. While Head Start program leadership is an inclusive process, the ultimate responsibility lies with the governing body. The manual on the left is the Improving Head Start for School Readiness Act manual that explains and authorizes the National Head Start program, which provides comprehensive developmental services, including health, nutritional, educational, social, and other services to economically disadvantaged preschool children and their families. The manual on the right is the Head Start Program Performance Standards Guide that outlines the requirements and services Head Start agencies must provide to children and their families. You can access both manuals by clicking on the links. This visual allows you to see how the three entities of Head Start, the governing body, Policy Council, and management staff all collaboratively work together in order to provide leadership and strategic direction while also listing all representatives in those areas. Here, you can see how the management team, Policy Council, and governing body all play a part in developing or revising Head Start bylaws, developing or revising governance structure, provisioning leadership and strategic directions, monitoring the Head Start program's performance, and ensuring consensus. What makes a student eligible for Head Start, and how do they enroll? If the child is 3 years old by September 1st, he or she must have a Tyler ISD diagnosed disability prior to enrolling. Children who are also 4 years old by September 1st can enroll. Families are eligible to enroll if their income is equal to or below the most recent poverty line. Families are also potentially eligible to enroll for Head Start should they receive public assistance, including TANF, child-only payments. If the child is homeless or defined by statute, or if the child is in foster care, keep in mind this is granted that there are seats available at the time of enrollment. Here is the 2022 Poverty Guidelines chart used during enrollment when parents provide proof of income. This chart is also on the Tyler ISD website at the bottom of the Head Start page for reference. Head Start is allowed to have 10% of their family's over income granted. Those who are eligible based on the poverty guidelines are placed first. In determining, verifying, and documenting eligibility, program staff must conduct an in-person or virtual interview with each family. As parents complete the online application and the program staff receive the application, parents are directed to the Head Start webpage to schedule a parent meeting at their leisure using Calendly. During these parent meetings, the child's age is verified, as well as all documents checked, and an eligibility determination record is created. Head Start parent meetings are held in the parent room located at the Plyler complex, but can also take place over the phone if needed. One of the required documents to be verified for enrollment in accordance with Tyler ISD and Head Start policy is the child's birth certificate. In verifying income, staff must use tax forms, pay stubs, or other proofs of income to determine the family's income. If the family can't provide any of these documents, staff may accept written forms from employers, including written forms from individuals who are self-employed. If the family reports no income, the Head Start program may accept the family's self-declaration to that effect, along with documentation of efforts made by the Head Start staff to verify the family's income through a third party with consent of the family. Generally, the relevant time for income documentation is within the last year. If a family can demonstrate a significant change in income for the relevant time frame, program staff may consider current circumstances. For homeless students, the program may accept a written statement from the school district's homeless liaison or other service agency attesting that the child is homeless, or any other documentation that indicates homelessness, including information gathered on enrollment or application forms or notes from an interview with staff to establish that the child is indeed homeless. Public assistance. The program staff must be provided with documentation from the state, local, or federal agency that shows the family either receives public assistance or the family is potentially eligible to receive public assistance. In reference to foster care, the program staff must be provided with a court order or other legal or government-issued document, a written statement from a government child welfare official that demonstrates the child is in foster care, or proof of a foster care payment. If a family does not meet any of these criterion, the program may enroll a child who would benefit from services, provided that the participants only make up 10% of the program's enrollment and there are seats available. The Head Start program has established and implements outreach and enrollment policies and procedures to ensure it is meeting the needs of eligible children and children with disabilities before serving these students. This concludes your annual Head Start leadership and governance training.
We are trained.
You're trained. The trustees that are absent will have this sent to them, and they will also view this and sign a piece of paper saying they've been trained.
Very good.
In future years, we will actually have another video for you where we won't read every bullet.
Okay.
So we'll go over it, but y'all been
Very
trained.
informative. Good job, Mrs.
It
Holland.
really is. Very good job, Ms. Holland. And I do appreciate how our district executes the teaching and learning side of things now in regard to Head Start. I mean, it looks like a pre-K class in Tyler ISD, not a governmental class managed out of Dallas, separate thing that we were used to have to do. Same thing on the budget and materials management. I think we're doing a better job of making sure the taxpayers, even though it's kind of one of these ghost things that are out there because it's a federal program, and it's not as visible as some of the local stuff that we do or state-funded stuff, making sure that we are spending things correctly and we're not just warehousing a bunch of refrigerators and microwaves in some room over at the old, at the Lou, at St. Louis like we used to. So getting the materials and the resources into the classrooms for the kids is something we want to make sure we do. And at the back end, if we've got a little budget money left over, we're going to do that for instructional materials, not having our own little Costco or Best Buy over there. So there you go.
Very good. Okay, well, we'll now go into executive session. Do we have any action to follow?
No,
To your
sir.
knowledge, no action to follow. Okey dokey. Thank you.